People have been saying it for centuries. Died of a broken heart. We treat it like a metaphor. A poetic way of saying someone gave up. Someone missed another person so much they stopped wanting to be alive. We put it in songs. We put it on greeting cards. We say it at funerals when the real cause of death was something more clinical and we want to be kind. But here's the thing nobody tells you in a biology class. It is not a metaphor. It is a mechanism. And it has a name, a diagnosis code, a set of measurable physical changes that happen inside your body when you lose someone. Changes that in certain cases, under certain conditions, in certain bodies that were already carrying more than they could hold. Can kill you. This is the story of how that works. What actually happens inside your chest when your heart breaks. Why grief is not just something you feel, but something your body does. And why the organ you thought was just pumping blood turns out to be listening to everything. Let's start with the obvious question. Is broken heart syndrome real? Yes. Formally documented, peer-reviewed. Entered into medical literature in 1990 by Japanese cardiologist Hikaru Sato. Named Takotsubo, cardiomyopathy. After the Japanese word for an octopus trap. Because when you scan the heart of someone experiencing it, the left ventricle balloons outward into a round bottom narrow neck shape. That looks exactly like that trap. Sato did not invent the condition, he just finally gave it a name. The condition itself is ancient, as old as love, as old as loss, as old as any two people who ever found each other and built something together and then had one of them disappear. The name was new. The breaking was not. Here is what happens inside the body when it receives catastrophic emotional news. Picture someone getting a phone call. A voice on the other end saying something that cannot be unsaid. The death of a partner. The end of a marriage. A betrayal so complete it rewrites everything that came before it. The brain processes the information. And then it fires. It sends a massive surge of stress hormones flooding into the bloodstream. Adrenaline, cortisol, norepinephrine. A chemical response built for emergencies. Built for the moment when something is coming for you in the dark, and your legs need to move before your mind has caught up. This system is ancient. It kept your ancestors alive when the threats were immediate and physical and could be outrun. The problem is that the brain cannot always tell the difference between a predator and a phone call. The heart receives this flood. In most people, it handles it. The beat quickens. Blood pressure rises. The body goes to high alert, and then slowly, over hours and days, comes back down. But in some people, under sufficient stress, with a wave large enough, the surge is too much. The heart muscle goes into a kind of temporary paralysis. The left ventricle stops contracting properly. It balloons outward. Blood pools inside it. Pressure drops throughout the system. The chest tightens from the inside. From the outside, it looks exactly like a heart attack. The pain, the shortness of breath, the strange feeling spreading down one arm, the color draining from a face that was completely normal 10 minutes ago. Paramedics arrive. The ECG looks wrong. The patient is rushed into a cardiac unit. Everyone in the room moves with the focused urgency of people treating something they recognize. And then the scans come back, and the cardiologist sees something unexpected. The coronary arteries are clear. No blockage, no clot, no buildup of plaque narrowing the passage. Nothing that should have caused this. Nothing that the standard story of a heart attack requires. Just a heart that was overwhelmed by what the brain sent it. Just grief. Doing what grief does to a body that was not built to absorb it alone. Who does this happen to? Mostly women. Specifically postmenopausal women. Roughly 90% of reported cases fall into this group. The reason appears to be hormonal. Estrogen offers some protection against the cardiac effects of stress hormones. When estrogen drops after menopause, that protection drops with it. The heart becomes more vulnerable to exactly the kind of surge that Takotsubo requires. But it happens to men. And to younger women. And the trigger is not always grief. This is the part that stops people. Takotsubo syndrome has been documented after wedding announcements, after winning a major prize, after a surprise birthday party, after a phone call delivering news that was wonderful and completely unexpected and simply too large for the nervous system to absorb gracefully. The heart does not distinguish carefully between overwhelming good news and overwhelming bad news. It distinguishes between calm and not calm, between a wave the system can manage and a wave that is simply too high. The emotional content is almost irrelevant. The joy and the devastation can produce the same cardiac event. What matters is the size of the surge. What matters is how much the brain decides to send. Now, here is where it gets genuinely strange. The heart is not simply a pump with no opinions. It has its own nervous system. Roughly 40,000 sensory neurons embedded directly in the cardiac tissue itself. Neurons that communicate with the brain, not just receiving instructions from above, but sending information upward, reporting back, participating in the conversation. Cardiologists sometimes call this the little brain in the heart. It monitors. It responds. It has something resembling a memory for stress. An organ that has been through repeated episodes of cardiac shock does not respond the same way the first time it happened. When researchers at the Institute of Heart Math studied the relationship between emotional states and cardiac rhythms over many years, they found that the heart's electromagnetic field is the largest in the body, measurably, consistently, in every subject they studied. The organ you thought was just keeping you alive is broadcasting constantly, responding to the emotional environment around it, influencing and being influenced by the emotional states of people nearby. This is not mysticism, it is electrophysiology, measurable with instruments, reproducible in controlled conditions. The heart is not passive, it never was. But let's get back to the killing. Because Takotsubo is survivable, most people recover fully within weeks. The left ventricle returns to normal shape. Function restores. The cardiologist signs the discharge paperwork, and the patient goes home to the house that is now quieter than it used to be. So when does heartbreak actually kill someone? 3 ways. The first is direct. During the acute event, the stress surge triggers a fatal arrhythmia. The heart loses its rhythm completely and cannot recover it. In a very small number of cases, particularly in people with underlying cardiac vulnerabilities. This happens quickly, and it is final. The second way is slower, and it kills more people. Grief that does not resolve keeps the stress hormone system elevated for weeks and months. Chronic cortisol exposure damages the lining of blood vessels, raises blood pressure persistently, promotes systemic inflammation throughout the cardiovascular system, increases the likelihood of dangerous clot formation. The bereaved partner who dies within months of losing their spouse of 40 years is not dying of sadness in any poetic sense. They are dying of sustained physiological damage to a cardiovascular system that received a distress signal 6 months ago and never received the all clear. The body stayed in emergency mode, and emergency mode is expensive. The body cannot afford it indefinitely. The third way is the one nobody talks about, the immune system. Grief suppresses it, measurably and significantly. Researchers studying recently bereaved individuals found dramatically reduced activity in natural killer cells, the white blood cells whose specific job is to identify and destroy abnormal cells before they become something worse. Studies tracking widows and widowers over years following bereavement found elevated cancer rates in the grieving population. The connection is not simple. Grief does not cause cancer directly, but a suppressed immune system that is fighting less hard than usual creates conditions in which things that might otherwise have been caught early are not caught early. The body under sustained grief is not just sad. It is immunologically compromised, fighting less, watching less, letting things through that it would normally handle without any conscious awareness at all. So what does all of this mean? It means the people who said you could die of a broken heart were not being poetic. They were being accurate with the vocabulary they had. They did not have the scans or the hormone assays or the longitudinal studies of a million Danish couples. They did not have natural killer cell counts or cortisol measurements or electrophysiology labs, but they were watching something real. The widow who sat down in her chair 3 months after the funeral and did not get back up. The man who had his first cardiac event 6 weeks after his wife of 40 years was gone. The body that absorbed a loss so complete it simply could not maintain the biological cost of continuing without the thing that had kept it regulated. These were not failures of will, not weakness, not giving up in any meaningful sense. They were bodies doing exactly what bodies do under sustained, overwhelming physiological stress, failing in the only direction available, the direction every body eventually finds, just sooner than anyone wanted. There is one more thing worth knowing. The most protective factor against dying of a broken heart is not medication, not prior cardiac health, not age or genetics or any of the variables doctors usually reach for first. It is other people, close relationships, regular meaningful contact, the quiet biological signal of being known by someone who will still be there tomorrow. The data on this is consistent across decades of research, and it is not subtle. Social connection is as predictive of longevity as quitting smoking. More predictive than regular exercise. More predictive than diet or weight management or cholesterol intervention. The body needs other people the way it needs food. Not metaphorically, biologically. The immune system functions better when it does not have to be afraid. The stress hormone system returns to baseline faster when the brain receives regular evidence that it is not alone. The cardiovascular system operates at lower sustained pressure when something outside the body confirms repeatedly that the emergency is over. Your ancient ancestors understood nothing about cortisol or natural killer cells or electromagnetic cardiac fields. But they understood something that took us until the 21st century to measure in a laboratory. That a person alone is a person in danger, and a person held close by others is a person whose body can finally stop preparing for the worst. Takotsubo, cardiomyopathy, first formally named in 1990. The condition itself as old as loss. Somewhere tonight, someone is sitting in a house that used to have more people in it. Their stress hormone system quietly elevated. Their immune function quietly reduced. Their heart doing something slightly different in the dark than it was doing a year ago. Not because they are weak, because they are human. Because the body was built for connection by millions of years of evolution that had absolutely no interest in preparing us for its absence. The broken heart is not a metaphor. It is a diagnosis. And the cure, if there is one, has been available for as long as we have existed. It is just another person, close enough to hear breathing, close enough to change everything.